What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. It's Game Week 36 plus preview time. As always, lots to go through. Your questions, your topics, free hit options, Man City options, relegation candidates. There's loads to go through, plus captaincy as well. Not long till the deadline. Let's jump into it. So let's talk about players from relegation threatened teams first. I was a little bit surprised about how many people asked me about this, but the narrative at this time of the season usually is get players with something to play for. So we've got players looking to win the league. That's already done. Players and teams to look at staying the Champions League spots. That's not done. The next kind of best thing is relegation candidates, because obviously the prize for staying in the Premier League is so big. So let's go through them quickly, because to be honest, I don't think there's too many options. I think you need players with something to play for, but they also have to have good fixtures. The team has to preferably be in form, and the players have to be in form as well. Now, the fixtures could bring the form, of course, but there's a reason why these teams are in the relegation zones, because they've not been very good this season. And teams don't suddenly go from being not very good to great just because it's the last 3 games of the season. But there might be some options there as well. So the teams we're looking at: West Ham, Watford, Bournemouth, Aston Villa and Norwich. Norwich obviously already relegated, so they've literally got nothing to play for now. Apart from maybe new contracts, transfers to other clubs. I'm sure there's quite a few players in that Norwich team where other Premier League teams will be looking at them. Cantwell, Buendia, for example. Even though Cantwell hasn't really been starting the last few games, but still, they're players that are probably going to want to stay in the Premier League. And players who are good enough, probably, who some teams will be looking at. We'll have to wait and see how the transfers go. But I'm sure there'll be some clubs sniffing around those players. So let's go through them one by one. Like I said, you're really looking for form, fixtures, and something to play for, not just something to play for. So West Ham got Watford at home. Obviously did really well against Norwich, by the way, in the last game, 4-0. I'm sure we've all heard about that by now. Watford at home, Man United away, and Aston Villa at home. So on paper, 2 out of 3 fixtures are quite good, but they are against other relegation sides as well. So that could be tricky. And the thing with Watford, I think James and Sue's pointed this out on Planet FPL, that's the last game of the week. By the time that game comes around, Villa could have lost, Bournemouth could have lost. It doesn't mean that either side doesn't want to win, but a draw wouldn't be the worst case scenario. So maybe the kind of intensity of that game might be quite low. We'll have to wait and see. But I think West Ham have got quite a few options, especially in attack. Like Souček has looked quite good. Most people see him as a defensive midfielder, but he gets forward quite a lot. Bowen's super unlucky not to get points in the last game, and Antonio obviously on fire. Even discounting the Norwich game, he's looked good before that. So I think they're all options in attack. If you want to punt on the defence, Diop, Fredericks, Cresswell, maybe Fabianski if you need a goalkeeper. I'm not sure I'd personally be looking at West Ham defence still, but potentially an option there. Now, Watford at home and Villa at home look good. Man United away is tough. The only thing I would say is, and I thought this before the game against Southampton, I do think that Antonio probably could cause our defence quite a few problems. We saw Danny Ings and co do it last night. Now, I'm not saying West Ham will be set up as well organised. I'm not saying they'll press as much as Southampton did. So Man United will probably have more of the ball and control that game a little bit more. But I do think Antonio will cause Maguire and Lindelof problems. And if Haller's back as well, that's 2 kind of forwards they have to worry about. And Antonio's got the pace as well to really cause problems. So I quite like Antonio if you had to play him in that Man United game. But so many people have got 8 attackers at this point. You could just bench him and play him against Watford and Villa. So I do like him. Looking at Watford, the problem for me is the fixtures. So West Ham away is okay. Then it's Man City at home and Arsenal away to end the season. That's not ideal. I certainly wouldn't be looking at a defender. No clean sheet since the restart at all. I know that as a Ben Foster owner. Players like Deeney, they'll be up for games like this. They'll be up for the battle. They'll be up for playing the big teams like Man City and Arsenal. I mean, Man City is really tough. Arsenal, they probably could get something there if they play kind of the top of the level that they can play at. But will they do that? I don't know. I personally wouldn't be looking there. Deeney is on penalties. Obviously, he scored 2 in the last game, which was ideal for people that bought him in. But for me, the fixtures just aren't there, and I certainly wouldn't be looking at them defensively. Bournemouth, I mean, where did that 4-1 result come out of? The last game. They drew against Spurs as well. So they've only actually conceded 1 goal in the last 2 games against Spurs and Leicester. Now, Spurs and Leicester haven't been that great. But Bournemouth, could they be options? I mean, no one's going to bring them in against Man City away. Let's just say that. Then it's Southampton at home and Everton away. Could they get something there? Have they kind of turned a corner? It will give them confidence, the last 2 results, I think. Getting 4 points, again, from Leicester and Spurs is a really good result. The problem is, they've lost Ake. I don't know how long he's out for, but that looks like it could be a season ender, the way he blocked that ball and had to go off. So defensively, certainly not looking at Bournemouth players. Attacking wise, look, Stanislas is on penalties. We saw that against Leicester. Wilson played okay. David Brooks is in there playing all right as well. They're massive punts. They have got something to play for. You could say they've got a little bit of form. And Southampton away and Everton, the way they're playing at the moment, might not be the worst fixtures. The only thing is, I still think Everton defensively are going to be okay. I think that Wolves result is probably not what's going to come for Everton over the last 3 games. I think Ancelotti will get them back and organised as a defensive team, and Holgate could be back as well. So I don't necessarily think that's a good fixture. So that would probably what would put me off Bournemouth. If you want a massive punt, why not go for someone like Stanislas or Callum Wilson? Aston Villa, I think Aston Villa and Norwich, to be honest, I would go for absolutely no one. Norwich have got Chelsea away and Man City away in the last 3 fixtures, and the other one's Burnley at home, so it doesn't really get much easier in terms of attack and returns. There's no way I'm going for a Norwich defender. And pretty much the same for Villa. They're just not scoring enough goals. Defensively, they've looked okay, but who's going for an Aston Villa defender right now? Everton away, Arsenal at home, West Ham away. It's just not good enough. So for me, the only real options are West Ham attackers and Bournemouth players if you really want to punt. Outside of that, I'm just not looking at relegation candidates. And I do think, something to play for or not, there's a reason they're in the bottom teams. I would still target them, most of those teams, for attack and returns as well. Top 3 hit players. Now, look, I had so many free hit questions this week. I'm not going to build a team. People want me to do a team for it. I sometimes do those videos. I'm not doing it this week. There's not enough time, basically. So I'm going to go through my top 3 hit players. And to be honest, there's nothing out of this world. You'll have seen these players recommended all week already. So I think I wouldn't discount Man United. I think I said this on the Scoutcast. One thing with a free hit is don't feel like you have to change your whole current team. If you've got like a midfield 5 and you're really happy with 4 or 5 of those players, whether you free hit or not, keep them. If you think they're going to do really well, just because you got the free hit doesn't mean you have to change them. Now, you can play aggressive and change the whole team if you want, all 11 players, but you could get severely punished by doing that, because if you've got a team of 5 midfielders now that you're really happy with Gameweek 36, then you swap them out, I think that only ends one way. So I wouldn't necessarily feel like you have to change all 11 or all of your first 11 at all. So Man United still got to be looked at. Now, they did look quite tired against Southampton, and that would be pretty demoralising, the way they kind of lost that 3-point lead in that game, obviously in the last touch of the game, literally the tap in from Obafemi. That's not good at all, but they've got a really good fixture to bounce back from, and that is Palace. No clean sheets since the restart, and they are a team that I usually wouldn't kind of attack for kind of attack and returns, because you'd expect them to drop deep and maybe get some clean sheets, but they've kind of been actually trying to play a bit of football, I think, since the restart. It's not helped them at all. 15 goals conceded in 6 games. So that's a good option to have Man United players there, the likes of Fernandes, Martial, maybe Rashford looking good as well. Obviously Greenwood if you need some money too. I think Chelsea players, absolutely, especially if we get early team news. The only thing I would say is, will they rotate heavily? I don't think so, because top 4 is still in their hands. So they need to get that win, because it's Liverpool and Wolves next. So I don't think they're actually going to rotate that much, especially the likes of Pulisic. Lampard's pretty much come out and said he's almost like free from criticism, and his place is not a worry. Everyone else's place, it's a different story. So he's kind of back Pulisic. So I don't expect them to rotate that heavily. The question is, how many goals will they get quickly, and how many minutes will they actually get? Because if they're like 2 or 3-0 up, let's say Pulisic's got 1 attack and return, it's 60 minutes, he's probably coming off and getting saved for the FA Cup. So that's my only worry. But it's such a good fixture. We saw what West Ham did to them. There's no reason Chelsea can't do the same. So perhaps a defender, someone like Alonso if he gets started. Otherwise, Reece James, Azpilicueta look quite good for that Norwich game. Although I wouldn't be completely surprised if Norwich scored the way Chelsea defend. But still, I think for that fixture, you've got to go for one. And then Willian, Pulisic and Giroud. I like all 3 of them. I mean, arguably, Willian has been playing, at least from a stats point of view, has been playing better than Pulisic. Creates more chances, almost as many shots, and could be on penalties if Jorginho misses out as well. So he could be an option. I like Giroud as a 1-week punt as well. But the only thing is, you have all 3 of them in your attack. So let's say you've got 7 attackers that you can play. You have 3 of them. That means you can only have 4 from Man City and Man United. So I would be careful about absolutely going all in on Chelsea attack. I'd probably rather have 2 and get some Man City and Man United players. And I'll just quickly touch on Man City. Look, it's impossible to call the rotation for Man City. I still like Jesus this week. If you absolutely want to avoid rotation or give yourself the best chance to avoid it, then David Silva and Foden do look like they're probably going to start. But who's to say Pep won't rest one of them and play, I don't know, Sterling, Jesus and Foden across the middle and just rest David Silva again, save him for the FA Cup? It could happen. We don't know. But those two do look like they're probably going to play. So David Silva, Foden, +1. I quite like Sterling or Jesus. Are they going to start? I've got no idea. Just have to hope for it from there, really. And is De Bruyne essential? So going on Man City players, look, lots of people still saying to me, will play this X start? Will play a Y start? Will they get rotated? If you're worried about that, you're never going to bring in a Man City player. Never. At least not for the rest of this season. They could get rotated. They could have their minutes managed. You know what? They could also get a really big score against Bournemouth, against Norwich, against Watford. 3 really good fixtures to end the season. So is Kevin De Bruyne essential? No. I don't think any player is essential. Is he heavily owned? And if he goes nuts and you don't have him and the player you've brought in instead of him blanks, will that hurt your rank? Yes. He's only got 1 assist in the last 9 games. I would consider that unlucky. I think he's probably, the way he's played, deserved more. And also he is on penalties as well. So as soon as they get a penalty, that's pretty much 5 points for him guaranteed, plus whatever else returns he's got. But he is heavily owned, 97% owned in the top 10k before Gameweek 35. So you're not going to get like a big rank increase if he does well, because everyone else owns him anyway. And that's not to say you should get rid of him, but if you want to go for it, if you're that type of manager that wants to play aggressively, you could swap to a Sterling, 17% owned. You could swap to David Silva, 0.44% owned. You know, Mahrez is 20%, Foden 17%. I think Foden and David Silva probably start. So there are better options in terms of ownership in that Man City team. But is he essential? No. Should you absolutely get rid of him? No. I'm probably going to keep him, to be honest. I'm not that kind of manager necessarily to make those big moves every single week. So I'll probably keep him. I still think he's a good option. I know my rank's not going to increase heavily if he does well, but I don't know if I necessarily back myself right now to make the right decision on who to get instead. So essential, no. Must get rid of, no. Must own, no. You know, all that good stuff. But yeah, there's lots of Man City options and there's lots of less owned players if you want to absolutely go for it. That's all I would say. So is Giroud worth a punt? And this is Chelsea options in general. Now, I know I've just spoken about them on free hit, but this is more, should you get them in for Norwich and then keep them for the rest of the season or look to get rid of them? So there were similar kind of things last week when people were looking to do Jimenez to Vardy. Now, nothing to say that Vardy won't keep scoring for the rest of the season, but his fixtures after that Bournemouth game are not as good as the Bournemouth game looked to be. So Sheffield United, Spurs, etc. for Vardy. So for me, it felt like a transfer in and then a probable transfer out. And I feel like Chelsea players are the same. So they've got Norwich, but then they have Liverpool and Wolves. And Wolves have been defending really, really well. I think that'll be a really tough game for Chelsea. And there could still be kind of European, deciders for Wolves in that game. Wolves will want European football next year. And it might not be absolutely safe by that game. We'll have to wait and see. And then Liverpool, and I know people are saying like Liverpool aren't defending that well at the moment. I agree. They've not been keeping as many clean sheets as you'd expect, but they are rotating. Will they rotate against Chelsea? Will they play a strong first 11? They might do. They might play their first 11 team. And also, Chelsea have to play in the FA Cup. Liverpool don't. Liverpool have got a full rest. In fact, they're one of the best teams in terms of recovery periods at the moment, especially with no FA Cup games. So Chelsea, like I've already said, are probably not going to rotate in that Norwich game. I don't think they really can afford to, especially in certain positions. Look, they might change like Jorginho out. They might change Christensen out from centre-back. But in an attacking sense, I don't expect too much rotation. But that Liverpool game is going to be tough, I think. I don't think there's a huge amount of goals in it. Now, would I still target Chelsea for this Norwich game? I still think it's a great game, especially if we find out that, Giroud, Willian and Pulisic are going to start. I still think it's a great game. So, for example, for me, I've got Antonio, who's playing Watford at home, good fixture, then Man United away. That's probably worse than Pulisic playing Norwich at home and then Liverpool away. Only slightly. I still think Liverpool away is a really tough game. But would I make that switch? Maybe. Because I don't think there's too many midfielders that we don't already own who have got better fixtures for kind of Game Week 37 and 38. Like Burnley do, for example. But, McNeil versus a Pulisic versus a Mahrez is probably... no one's going to do that, basically. So I still think they're worth a punt. But I do think you're probably not going to want, or you probably shouldn't expect too many returns after that. So Giroud, for example, is a bit of a problem for me because who knows if Abraham won't start the next 2 games after this. And if you don't get team sheet news before the Norwich game, who's to say that Tammy Abraham won't start again? I would say they're a better team with Giroud in the side, not because he's necessarily going to score more than Tammy Abraham, but he's going to enable the likes of Pulisic to get in behind. He can hold up the ball, head the ball on. He's a problem from corners. And let's not forget, Antonio scored 2 goals from corners against Norwich. So that could be big for Giroud as well. So from a non-free hit perspective, I do think they're worth a punt. But I do think you might be in a similar situation to Vardy. If the punt doesn't pay off, you've then got Liverpool and Wolves next, and that suddenly doesn't look as enticing. So I don't think I would go all in on Chelsea, personally, if I was not on a free hit. But one or two players, they could do so well against Norwich that it won't matter if you then have to get rid of them, even for hits afterwards, because you'll have got so many points. Differentials for the last 3 weeks. I actually think this is tough. I don't think there's too many around, and that is mostly because it's the top teams that still have the best fixtures. Like we've talked about Man City and Man United since the start of restart, and their fixtures are still really good. So I've already talked about Man City players. For me, they are still big differentials. That ownership I talked about earlier, so Foden 17%, Mahrez 20%, David Silva 0.44, etc., etc., that will go up before this game because those percentage ownerships in the top 10k are before or from Gameweek 35. So obviously people have made transfers between 35 and 36. So they are going to go up a little bit. But for me, that's still a big differential. Even if Sterling goes from like 17% to 30% in the top 10k, that's still pretty big. Only 3 out of every 10 managers own him. That's still a big differential in my eyes. So I still like Man City players. And you'll keep seeing on Twitter and in the comments on YouTube videos and stuff, is this player a risk? Should I bring this player in? He's not going to start. People are still worried about Man City. So if you go for it and you nail the right player, they are still big differentials, especially if you captain the right one, which we'll talk about later. Brighton have got good fixtures. Southampton away, Newcastle at home, Burnley away. The only thing I would say is, are those 2 away games, Southampton and Burnley, full of goals? I'm not 100% sure. But Trossard, 0.01%, could be an option. I think he's gone a little bit under the radar in the last few weeks. I've seen Apple Bonkers on Twitter. Someone I follow picked him up a few weeks ago and he's done really well. So 0.01% if you wanted a massive punt. But again, where does he fit in the sea of midfielders? Like, I'd happily have 8 or 9 midfielders right now and not have any forwards. So trying to fit him in is tough. Burnley, after this week when they play Wolves, they got Norwich away, obviously a fixture we're targeting a lot. Brighton at home. McNeil, 0.03% owned. J-Rod, 0.01% owned. Wood, 0% ownership in the top 10k. So something I've thought about, for example, is bringing in Ings for Jimenez and then maybe upgrading Nketiah to someone like J-Rod or Wood and then benching, and if I keep Antonio, basically benching him against Man United away. That's a potential option as well for that Norwich game. Chelsea captain, I think that will still be a big differential this week. Don't let Twitter fool you. A lot of people will be captain in Pulisic. It's a very small percentage. He will be much higher captain this week than he has been since restart. But it's still, for me, I don't think it's going to go over 100% effective ownership. And if he bangs and Man City, Man United players don't, then that's a huge differential. So I still like that for captaincy. And the same thing for Man City. Like David Silva captaincy, if you get that right against Bournemouth at home, that could be a big differential. Outside of that, I'm not seeing too many kind of genuine big hitters that you either don't already own or it's very hard to bring in because of the players we own. So yeah, there's a few differentials around, but not a massive amount that I can really see. But let me know in the comments below if that's different for you, who you kind of targeting as a differential. And lastly, defensive transfers, are they a waste? I would say no, but also maybe. It depends on what your team is looking like. So for me, for example, I have 2 free transfers this week. I could do Jimenez to Ings. The other one, I could make a defensive transfer or I could make an attacking transfer. I think a lot of people, and I'm not saying everyone has the same players as me, but if I look at my team as an example, I have Liverpool, Man United, Wolves, Burnley and Sheffield United defenders. Most of those teams have good fixtures or good defensive fixtures for the rest of the season. Is there a defensive transfer that I can make that's going to get me so many points it's worth the transfer? I'm not so sure. Like top of the list for kind of defensive fixtures is Everton. So if I had to make a defensive transfer, I would probably bring in Lucas Digne. I've spoken about him a few times over the last couple of videos. But do I think he's going to be so good that I just need to bring him in ahead of an attacking transfer? Not really. But if you're not happy with your defence and you're very happy with your attack, why not make one? Like if you think you can get some extra points, it all helps. Like Pope, I think the difference between Pope and Foster since the restart is only actually 17 points, even though it feels much more. But 17 points adds up hugely. Like this week, my score, I'm now only 25 points behind the top 10k. The top 100k. That's still going to be difficult to kind of get to. But 25 points over 3 weeks is doable. And maybe a defensive transfer could do that. So I wouldn't necessarily not do it. But for me, I would prioritise the attacking transfers where you're maybe going to get that bigger difference in points. But if you need to make a defensive transfer to fund an attacking transfer, or you've just got a spare one with absolutely nothing to do with it, why not? If you can get extra points, it all helps in the end. Let's talk about captaincy now. Since restart, there hasn't really been a massive standout option, I would say. Like Kevin De Bruyne maybe in game week 30 with a double game week, but a lot of people, or for a lot of people, there hasn't been a standout option most weeks, and that's a good thing, I think. Some weeks it's because there's been so many good options. Some weeks it's because there's not really been that many good options, and kind of every team has an okay fixture, not a great one. And I think it's the same this week because Man City have got a great fixture, Man United have got a great fixture, Chelsea have arguably got the best fixture. People are forgetting about Liverpool players who could do well as well. So there's lots of good options this week. Targeting the right one is going to be difficult, but if you get it right, it's a big increase, as we saw with Salah captainers in game week 35 plus. So let me just talk quickly about one other game. I guess Leicester versus Sheffield United. Some people might be looking at Vardy, but for me, Sheffield United are on my don't attack them list because they've defensively been so good this season, and now they've got that proper back five back with Henderson as well. I think that looks difficult to kind of penetrate. So for me, Leicester, Vardy, not a good captaincy option for me this week. These are the four main fixtures, I think. Man City, Bournemouth, Chelsea, Norwich, Palace versus Man United, Arsenal versus Liverpool. So, obviously, the worry, which I've already talked about with Man City, is going to be, are my players going to get rotated? And do you know what? They might get rotated. They also might get a big haul in the last 30 minutes. We just don't know. Ake out is a big miss as well. I know defensively they did okay against Leicester once he went off the pitch, but there's also a period of that game where they were down to 10 men, Leicester, that is. So it was quite easy for Bournemouth. So I've said this a few times over the last few weeks when I've been like kind of doing live watch-alongs and stuff on Fantasy Football Scout. If Man City get an early goal in that Bournemouth game, it's done. There's no way Bournemouth are coming back, and it could be another 4 or 5-0 win. And Man City have pretty much done that to every team since the restart. I know Southampton was a 1-0 loss, but let's be honest, City should have scored in that game quite a few times. So this could be absolutely devastating for Bournemouth, I would say. Like, if City score 4 or 5 goals, no one is going to be shocked. So for me, I like this fixture. Now the problem is, who's going to play? I don't know. I'm not even going to sit here and pretend to you that I do. Outside of Foden and David Silva will probably start, but even them, they're not guaranteed. I still like Jesus. I still think there is a chance he starts. Yes, he's played quite a few games, but he's not played very many minutes, and I think Pep wants to keep him fit, try and get him firing before the FA Cup, before the Champions League. So I think there's a chance he gets another 50 to 60 minute run out before being subbed off, and by that point, it could be 3 or 4-0 already. So I quite like Jesus as an option this week, and I am considering it myself. I think everyone else is good as well. Mahrez, De Bruyne, Sterling. You are going to get unlucky. Some of you are going to get unlucky. If kind of there was 100 people, a third of you captain Mahrez, a third Sterling, a third De Bruyne. Some of you are going to get unlucky that they don't start. They could come on and score, but you know they might just blank or be rested completely. So I like this as a big punt, and I say punt because you just don't know who's going to start, but that is going to be a big score. No matter who starts, they're going to score 3, 4 or 5 goals, you'd expect. So I like the punt there. I think, for me, I think if Foden plays, and this is me stupidly trying to guess the team, if Foden plays, he's probably going to play in one of the wide positions, left or right. So that only leaves one space for kind of Sterling or Mahrez, or even Bernardo Silva if they want to play him again. Although he has been playing mostly more central. So let's say it's Foden and then one of Sterling, Mahrez. Then you'd expect Jesus to be up front. But maybe they will finally play this false nine that they haven't played that often since the restart. Sterling up front, Mahrez on the right, Foden on the left. It could be, in which case then Mahrez and Sterling look like great options. And will Kevin De Bruyne definitely get a rest? I don't think so. I think there's a good chance, again, he gets maybe a 50 or 60 minute run out. But, of course, they could just play like Rodri, Gundogan, David Silva in there and not need Kevin De Bruyne. So, for me, I've got Kevin De Bruyne, Jesus and Mahrez. In order of captaincy, I'd probably go Jesus, maybe then Mahrez, then De Bruyne. I am a little bit worried about De Bruyne not starting, but again, I do not know. If you want to go for it, I think this is one of the best fixtures if you want to take a punt. Especially when, to be fair, Man United look tired against Southampton. Will they come back and do really well against Palace? Will Man United rest some players before the FA Cup? Probably not, because of the top 4. But again, maybe it's a time to bet against Man United. And if you haven't got Chelsea players and you've not got that Norwich fixture either. I've already talked a lot about Chelsea versus Norwich. I think it's a great fixture. I think... Look, I've given some stats recently on Twitter that Pulisic, since the restart, there's 31 players with a higher expected goal involvement than him since the restart. There's 16 players with a better non-penalty expected goals as well. So goal threat-wise and kind of assist-wise, he's not actually been that good from a stats perspective. I know a lot of people will say, well, if you watch the games, he's looked good. and I agree. But at some point, you've got to convert that into big points. Now, he has ticked over really nicely. He's been a really steady scorer, but he's not had a double-digit haul yet. But if Antonio can score 4 against Norwich, I'm pretty sure Pulisic can as well. We've already seen a hat-trick from him this season. So I like him, I like Willian, I like Giroud. I think they're all nice options against Norwich, especially if we find out they're definitely starting. I think Pulisic will. I just don't see rotation. Like Man United, they have to get the win. So that's a big call too. And then Man United versus Palace. So the home and away scores, they are a thing, but I don't know how much attention I pay to them. So if you look at like Martial, his home form, like his recent home form, his big scores are huge compared to his away ones. So does that mean he's just not an option against Crystal Palace? I don't think it works like that. There's no reason why he can't score away from home. So Fernandes is still the one. Might take the next penalty, assist potential. Although I must admit I haven't been impressed with his set pieces recently. And Maguire, for example, has only had 2 shots in the box since restart. So in terms of like him getting assists from a corner, it's not looking great so far. But obviously, you can still get open play returns as well. So I still think Fernandes is a good option. And I think, because he only got an assist against Southampton, I reckon he'll be less captain this week than he might have been if he got another haul. I think that just puts people off a little bit. So Fernandes is still a great option. I think Rashford's looked good. Greenwood, I think there's a chance Greenwood maybe gets a rest in one of the next 2 games, whether it's Crystal Palace or the Chelsea game in the FA Cup. I actually think there's probably slightly more chance it's the FA Cup, because although it almost means more, apart from you don't get a Champions League spot for it. I just think against Chelsea, maybe putting Dan James in for that pace on the counter could be a good option. But I do think Greenwood probably needs a little bit of a rest. Whether that's Crystal Palace or not, I don't know. And I think Rashford, look, if you sold Rashford to Greenwood, you must have been expecting some goals at some point. Most people did that for the money. And Rashford's looked good the last few games. He's been unlucky not to score more. And I'd say that's exactly the same against Southampton. He should have scored at least 1 more goal. On another day, he comes away with a brace. So I do think Man United are good options. And don't forget Liverpool versus Arsenal. If you really want to go for a punt, go for Aubameyang against that Arsenal defence, which maybe has looked a little bit leakier than normal. And the thing with Liverpool is Arsenal have been defending quite well. They've got this new system under Arteta, and they have been defending well. But the problem with Arsenal is they still have some defenders that on their day can be really poor and make big mistakes. So there is a chance that the likes of Salah and Mane could do really well against Arsenal. I personally think there's so many other good fixtures that I wouldn't captain those two and probably be differential enough just to own them at this point. But if you wanted to go for it, not many people are going to be looking at this Arsenal fixture. And if you get the right player, so whether it's Salah or Mane, it could be a big score if the Arsenal defenders have a kind of off day. But I do think they've been defending well enough that they're going to keep the score down. I don't think it'll be a big score. So I don't necessarily see huge returns for both Salah and Mane in this one. So for me, I'm looking between Fernandes and Jesus. I think maybe Pulisic if I bring him in. Let me know in the comments below, who are you looking at for captaincy this week? That's it for this video. As always, give it a like if you enjoyed it. Really helps out the channel. Subscribe if you're new around here as well. Hit that button so you know when all the other videos are going live. There's a couple more to the right of the screen if you want to watch some more of my stuff. Otherwise, links in the description below for stuff like Instagram, Patreon and Twitter. So go and follow me on those and I will catch you next time. Cheers all.